reinvent your practice one hire at a time. Let's go. Hey everybody, Rafi from Rehab U Practice Solutions and the host of the Better Outcomes Show. And today I want to talk with you about 5 things to think about when we're hiring employees or staff at our clinical practices. I'm calling it reinvent your practice one hire at a time. Let's dive right in. So recently at the practice, I had to replace a team member. That's never fun. You always think about going through the process. What could I have done better as a manager, as a leader? What were some things that were simply just by nature of the organization and the way goals and maybe mission and vision have shifted, that means that we need to change up team players, and how do we communicate that in an effective way? And I just came back to thinking about, we had Dr. Mike Neal on the show maybe a year and a half ago, the guy from Build Your Team, and he talked a lot about looking at a team member leaving for whatever reason, whether you're voluntary or you had to replace them, whatever reason, and looking at it as an opportunity to upgrade the position. And I do like that idea. So I'm going to talk about that, but I'm thinking about 5 topics or 5 points about reinventing your practice one hire at a time. So let's dive right in. I'm just going to lay out the five topics or the 5 things to think about, and then I'll kind of dive into each one. So number 1 is you can use the opportunity to correct hiring mistakes. Number 2 is looking for more of a culture or mission vision fit. Number 3 would be the opportunity or using the opportunity to raise up leaders within the organization. And you can do that one of 2 ways, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Number 4 is, again, upgrading the position. And then number 5 is just being a good leader or a good manager. So let's talk about that first one, correcting hiring mistakes. I don't know about you, but they did not give me a business or a management class at all going through clinical training. They might have talked about supervision. They might have talked about some management aspects here and there in like a paragraph or maybe a guest lecture, but it was not something that was covered in great detail. Now, a lot of my work in consulting has put me in a position where I've had to be the one making some of those recommendations and making, helping my clients correct hiring mistakes. But the reality is nobody's perfect at hiring anybody. Even if you've been doing it for a while, you're going to make a mistake. Or, like I said at the beginning, maybe you hire somebody with an intention for them to do a certain job or to play a certain role on the team, and then priorities change and shift, and the business itself no longer requires the skill set that individual has. Not that that's a hiring mistake, but sometimes we hire individuals and team members thinking that we need a certain skill set, and then realizing that we don't, that we need an entirely different skill set or a different role on the team, in which case we need to take that opportunity to correct that mistake or to fill out the team, if you would, for its full capacity, as opposed to trying to retrofit. Sometimes it can be done. A lot of times, though, it requires bringing in somebody else. Maybe this got a special or a different certification, or, like I said, a skill set that is required to do whatever the new position is. I remember someone saying years ago in a seminar that I sat in that the team that got you to where you're at now is not necessarily going to be the team that gets you to the next level. And this can be very true, and they're difficult conversations to have. Now, obviously, as a manager, as a leader, we'll talk about that more in number 5, but as a manager and as a leader, it's your responsibility to do those changes of the team, or to make those changes, one, as like humanly as possible. I mean, it's never fun to have to hire or lay off somebody, or just be honest with them and say, listen, we no longer need your services or your skill set. And maybe it is something, like I said, that you can mentor somebody through, and that you can coach them into becoming what you need to be. But in the event that it can't happen and you are aware of it, you need to be able to have those conversations and to make those decisions early on instead of dragging it out for a long time. So, and then there's the whole, we just came out of a very crazy time with COVID and people not working and then coming back into the job market. And it was difficult to find people. Some of my clients are telling me it's still difficult to find certain people to play different roles on the team, from benefits analysis or benefits verification to customer service to maybe like a marketing or lead generation role within the clinic, or even clinical team members as well. It's difficult to hire and find good people to do what we need them to do in the clinic and to deliver the level of care that we need to deliver. So sometimes, and I know I've done this, I did this early on at Proactive, I hired somebody very quickly because we needed a body. We needed somebody to treat patients. I'm not a physical therapist, but I own a physical therapy clinic. I'm an occupational therapist by trade. So when 80% of the referrals coming into the clinic are physical therapy, and you're down a physical therapist, it's like all hands on deck trying to find somebody. And you try to find somebody that's a good fit, but sometimes you're just stuck with what is available currently in the job market. And whenever that individual decides to move on, or it's time for them to move on, you can look at that as an opportunity to correct that hiring mistake. Maybe you hired somebody, and I have done this. You hire somebody who in the back of your mind, is not a good fit for the organization, but they meet the qualifications, they can do the job, and they're there, right? They're available. That's not always the best hire decision to make. Sometimes you need to, again, because if not, you're going under. You need to find somebody to treat your patients. But then when it's time for them to move on, we look at correcting that mistake. What about that individual did not fit within the culture of the organization? And that kind of moves us into that second role, or the second thing to think about, is using a team member replacement, for lack of a better term, a team member replacement as an opportunity to hire for and to improve both the culture at the organization, but then also make sure that you're following that mission, vision, fit thing that we talked about earlier. Because again, maybe you had a clear vision for what the organization was going to do, maybe even the business model or the strategy for the organization, and then something changes. Maybe you take it in a different direction. Maybe you remove a service offering. Maybe you add a service offering, and now you need somebody on the team that can fulfill a role. A perfect example here is a year and a half ago at Proactive, the clinic that I run, we did not do pelvic floor physical therapy because we did not have a pelvic floor physical therapist on the team. Now we do, though. And we are looking for, as we begin growing and adding new team members to the clinical side of the team, this is one of those areas now that a year and a half ago was not even on the radar, was not something that we hired for, but it's becoming a core component of the business and of the clinic and the practice. So when we're hiring maybe another PT or another PTA or something like that, we're looking for somebody who has that skill set, that's been trained, or maybe has completed some of the certification work or coursework to become certified in that area. And again, that's not an issue of like a bad hire to begin with, that we're correcting the problem. It's really just the marketplace has shown us that there's a need or a demand for this service. We have somebody on the team that can fulfill this service, and now we're going to build that component or build the ability or capacity to do that with new hires. Not that we're going to run out and overhire, but in the event that we do hire somebody else, we're going to be looking for somebody that can fill in that role, right? Another piece of this, thinking about like mission, vision, values, is somebody that really wants to do what your organization is set up to do, right? And a good example here is maybe you, and I've used this one in the past, I had a client years ago who had an outpatient shoulder to hand clinic. That's how they were marketing it, both to prospective clients and referral sources, as well as to prospective staff members. We treat everything from the neck to the fingertips. We're the go-to clinic for shoulder to hand therapy. And then all of a sudden they started getting some referrals for pediatrics. Maybe it was developmental. I think some of the stuff was like preschool screenings and sensory integration work and stuff like that. That's kind of outside of the realm of outpatient upper extremity ortho. And she tried building this into her, kind of dipping her feet into it and kind of committing some resources and some staff to it. Well, the problem was that her staff and her employees were hired on or joined the team with this idea of what the mission and the vision and the values of that organization were, and they did not include helping, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old develop appropriate sensory motor function, right? They were really focused on becoming certified hand therapists and working with post-surgical patients. So she found herself in a situation where the mission, vision, values fit wasn't a match. And ultimately she ended up changing course of the business, just cutting out that pediatric realm, and then a lot of that went away. But if she had decided to build that in as a core component of her business, she would have had to go out and find people that resonated with that mission, the vision, the values, the work itself, right? Another thing that's interesting here, and another thing that anytime an individual or a team member leaves and you're looking at replacing them, it provides an opportunity to build up or raise up leaders within the organization. So maybe it is somebody leaves for personal reasons, or they take another job, or we've had people retire recently. Maybe you have an open slot on your team and you're looking to hire to fill it. One of the things you can think about doing with the long-term vision for your clinic and your practice is, who on my team can I mentor or walk through the hiring process so that they are then in a position next time we have a hire to kind of take lead on it, right? And maybe you have somebody on your team already that's kind of involved in some of the hiring decisions, and maybe they're involved in some of the writing of the job descriptions or interviewing candidates or kind of sifting through resumes, whatever the deal is. You can use the opportunity of bringing on a new team member to coach and mentor one of your future leaders in the organization, if you would, to kind of walk through and build that competency so that, one, as things grow and as things expand, it's not reliant on you as the practice owner. A lot of my clients are like owner-operators. They're physical or occupational therapists that are running their own private practice, and the buck does stop with them a lot of times. But as you grow, as you scale, you need to build in systems for not being the linchpin of the organization, right? You want to make sure that the thing operates without you. So this is where you can use it as an opportunity to coach and to mentor new team members or maybe young leaders in your organization, and kind of bring them up so that they feel confident, they develop the competencies for hiring and recruiting and leading within the organization. And then walking somebody through that process also gives you an opportunity to document what's going on, right? You want a system that helps a new leader, a new manager in your organization walk through, this is what we look for in people that we hire for XYZ position. These are some of the competencies that are required. These are some of the background skills that we're looking for. This is what the mission and the vision and the values of the organization are. So we want to find somebody that resonates with this. And this could be something, you can get as granular as coming up with like an interview script. And I've done this at Proactive. I've got a folder on our shared drive. Everything runs out of a shared drive, right? And it's HR manual, basically. And it goes everything from job descriptions and job posting, the process for doing that, all the way through to, okay, how do we decide that it's time to hire somebody or to bring on a new team member? Obviously, there's a whole folder in there for how do we decide if it's time to replace a team member. But once the team member is going to be hired, we're going to hire somebody, what are the steps that are required, like the very basics? Like this is who needs to be involved in the decision. This is how we need to onboard we need to sift through the candidates. We need to reach out to those that we want to interview. This is what we say during an interview. This is the structure. So we're big fans of like a phone interview first, maybe a video interview if they're not local, or an on-site interview with the team. This is how those interviews are structured. These are the questions we ask, the order we ask them. This is the information we're trying to pick up in that first pre-on-site interview, phone interview, and then this is the information that we're trying to get when they're here in the clinic. And then, what's the process for extending the offer? What's obviously the forms, the templates, the offer letter, all of that. How do we input them in our HR system? All of that. And we did that basically over the course of just hiring a couple people over the last couple of years. And every time we would hire somebody, it was an opportunity to look at the process, look at the procedure, fill in the holes or the gaps so that if I do get hit by a bus, somebody down there in the downstairs, my studio is in the upstairs of the clinic, so somebody downstairs can go through hiring a replacement and kind of bringing on new team members and all that kind of stuff in the event that maybe I'm out for a month or something like that, right? The other thing, and this kind of falls in with that, raising up leaders, upgrading the position, kind of redefining what the position is going to be or should be. Because again, maybe you have like an office admin that was doing a lot of eligibility and benefits authorization and stuff like that. And now you've brought on, if you've been following the podcast at all, you brought on a virtual assistant, maybe an overseas virtual assistant who's doing all of that admin work. And now you, instead of having somebody that's really good and really focused on making sure the client or the patient has benefits that are good and what you need to do to get paid and all that kind of stuff. Now you need somebody to be able to explain that to the patient, or maybe to call the patient to schedule them, or to walk them through a financial or a good faith estimate, or a financial responsibilities form or something like that. And that is a different skill set than somebody who can verify the benefits, right? Or maybe it frees up. Maybe now that you've used this virtual assistant and they're doing a lot of the benefits authorizations, maybe that frees up one of your admin roles now to not be so much involved in the day-to-day benefits verification, but then kind of move into more of a lead generation or marketing role, where now instead of spending a lot of their time making sure a patient can be seen because of their insurance, they're getting patients on the schedule because you've got a funnel that's pumping out leads every day, and now you've got somebody that's got some time to do that, right? Either way works. There's positives and negatives of both, but you get my drift. That it's an opportunity to really look at the position itself and say, what was this individual doing that we, one, no longer need, or that, two, we would like them to have been able to do that they weren't doing just because either there wasn't enough time, or they were doing different tasks that we no longer need done. And then the final piece of this whole thing is just being a good leader. As difficult as it is, the reality of leadership is that the buck does stop with you. And if you have a team member on your team that is not a good fit culturally, or is not performing adequately, and you've taken the steps to try to counsel, to try to mentor, to try to coach them through whatever the difficulty or the challenge is, and they're still not getting it, or they're still falling short, or they're still failing to perform at the level required for the organization, you would be a bad leader if you kept them. And you need to have difficult conversations with people, hopefully before you get to that fact, because my contention is no one should ever be surprised that they're being fired. Sometimes people are surprised because regardless of how many times and how black and white you are, some people just simply don't see it as a real possibility until it happens. Maybe my wife calls them blue skiers. They always see the world in rosy sunglasses until finally it's not, right? Finally, till the lights go out. So some people just don't get it. But for the most part, you should do everything you can up to and leading up to the point where the decision has to be made that, okay, you can no longer be on this team. You need to do everything you can up to that point to make sure and to avoid that from happening. Because the reality is, and I feel this all the time as somebody that's a consultant that comes in and helps organizations with this type of thing, but then also being a team, the team leader here at the clinic that I run, like there are real consequences for the decisions that get made by management, right? There are decisions that are impacting a team member's ability to provide for their family, or to bring in financial resources to their family, their job, their career trajectory. Part of being a good leader, obviously, we focus on, and we really like the good stuff, like mentoring somebody and giving them the skills and kind of acting as the stepping stone for them to grow and expand their career and their skills, and hopefully within the organization, and be able to provide and contribute at a higher level to the organization than they have been in the past, because they're building skills and you're mentoring and you're coaching them. However, the opposite is also true, and you don't want to be responsible for somebody that's detracting from the work, that's acting as a boat anchor, if you would, and holding the team back because of what you are failing to do or to be willing to do, which is either have a difficult conversation or ultimately swap let a team member go and replace them. I think I've quoted this podcast a lot. The Two Bobs podcast, so Blair Enns and David C. Baker, they talk a lot about difficult conversations, and Blair Enns talks about difficult conversations within the sales cycle, like not backing down from pushing back on clients and that sort of thing. Like part of being a leader or an expert is the ability to push back and say, XYZ is not how we typically do it, or are you sure you want to do whatever it is? The same thing is very much true in leadership and management within the organization. Like I tell my wife all the time, like, I feel like my job more than anything is to, one, make sure the team has the resources that they need to do their job, and then to be the one that has the difficult conversations. Like my job is to have those conversations around performance, around expectations, around the ability or lack thereof to continue to keep somebody on the team. And, those are difficult conversations to have, and they're not fun. I remember the first time I had to fire somebody, I was like up all night the night before, like with knots in my stomach. But it was one of those decisions that as soon as the decision was made and the deed was done, there was almost like a sigh of relief in the office from this individual that was no longer supposed to be there. This was back when I was at an organization I was an employee somewhere. I was just a clinic lead. And what that demonstrated to me was that I waited too long, or it took too long to replace this teammate, that this person was not a good cultural fit. They were doing damage to the organization, and my lack of desire or my fear of conflict or whatever it was that kept me from having those difficult conversations, and ultimately the difficult conversation of firing and letting this person go, really strained the team. And that is my failure as a manager that was coming up, like a young leader. That was my failure. I put my team through something they didn't need to go through because I was unwilling to have a difficult conversation. So part of this, again, now that we're thinking about like reinventing your practice one team member at a time, part of the process then should be that whole adage, like, be slow to hire and quick to fire. If somebody is not a good fit, you don't need to drag it on for a year. You work on, obviously, you're not just firing people because they showed up late or whatever the deal is, but you lay out clear expectations early. When somebody fails to meet those expectations, you have a conversation with them, you counsel them if you would, you coach them, mentor them, provide whatever resources they need so that they can meet those expectations. And if they're not meeting those expectations in a clearly defined time period, then you elevate it, right? I am not one of those people. I worked for the VA. I've been through the bureaucratic mess. And my instinct is to be very loosey-goosey on stuff. And again, Blair Enns mentioned this in one of his recent podcasts, like, when was the last time you fired somebody or that a teammate moved on? And you can tell if it's been a very long time that he called it a tolerant culture, which sounds good on the surface, like, oh, we're tolerant of everybody, yada, yada, yada. But if you tolerate poor performance or bad behavior or whatever it is, that's not good. It's the opposite of good. So when you're hiring somebody, when we bring somebody on, part of that reinventing the culture or reinventing the practice is, with every new person that we bring on, we should be looking at providing more clear, more defined expectations, benchmarks for success, and then a system in place for what happens if you fail to meet those benchmarks or expectations. And that in and of itself will improve the culture. You'll be able to quickly and efficiently correct those hiring mistakes. If it is a hiring mistake, a true hiring mistake that the person just needs to move on, it's very difficult to do it if it's just loosey-goosey. Like, my personality would be like, oh, we'll kind of figure this out here. No, like, we need to be very clear about, these are the expectations. You did not meet XYZ. This is the plan for you to meet it in 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is. And if not, we escalate it to this level, and then ultimately you get terminated. No one ever wants to do it because you don't want to be, you don't want to feel like a jerk. And the reality is, you're not a jerk. You're providing clear expectations. And as somebody who has been both on the receiving end of poor management and on the receiving end of really positive and great management where expectations were clearly laid out, I would much rather have day one on the job, my supervisor, my boss say, hey, Rafi, these are the expectations that I am expecting from you in the next 30 days. You're going to do XYZ well. You're going to do whatever the expectations are. And if not, then we're going to have a conversation about how we get back on track, as opposed to, oh, we'll figure it out as we go. Because ultimately what ends up happening is, because there are no clear expectations laid out at the forefront, more often than not, when you fail to have those difficult conversations, you're kind of like you're bottling it all in, and sooner or later, it's like a tiny little infraction, and then a year and a half's worth of failed mismatched expectations or failed goals or whatever it is just come bubbling up to the surface, and it becomes an ugly scene, right? You fire somebody for something that probably shouldn't have been fired for, but because it's been a year and a half of not having difficult conversations. So we have difficult conversations early and often so that we don't have to have difficult conversations later. Anyways, those are my thoughts, very quick thoughts on reinventing your practice one hire at a time, and some of the things to keep in mind as we do it. So again, we can use it as an opportunity to correct hiring mistakes. We can use it as an opportunity to build the culture and the mission and the values of the organization, and then mission fit of the team members. So maybe we're swapping in somebody with new and different skills that we now need given a new service offering or a new way of doing business. It's an opportunity to, one, raise up leaders within the organization and then provide the roadmap for them through policies and procedures and all of that, through systems. It's the ability to the opportunity to upgrade the position. Again, maybe it's different skills, maybe it's better skills, maybe it's more efficiency, whatever it happens to be, but upgrade that position. What was this individual not doing that we wish they could do? And then let's hire somebody that can do that. And then the final point is just being a good leader all around, from managing the whole firing or replacement process in a way that is caring and empathetic, and in a way that is, deserving of the dignity of that person giving their time and their energy into your organization. You want to respect that decision by providing good leadership, even if it includes firing and terminating. And then being a good leader as we're bringing on new team members, and using every new onboarding as an opportunity to become an organization that lays out clear expectations, defines what is expected of employees and performance of team members and all of that. So if you like the show, head on over to iTunes, leave us a rating and review. Helps people find the show. Also, we've got, and I'll link to it in the show notes, we've just started, Matthew Curtis started a platform called Ask Answer. So you can go over to askanswer.co. You can look for, I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's rafisalzar.askanswer.co. Shoot me a short question, anything about maybe this episode or humanizing healthcare, or the book Better Outcomes, A Guide to Humanizing Healthcare, or practice management in general, and I'll be able to answer you in another video, and maybe we'll have a little bit of back and forth there. And if you are a practice owner or manager, and you're looking for a system to kind of attract, I call it attract, engage, acquire, or attract, inquire, engage, and retain more patients, head on over to betteroutcomesmedia.com or rehabuppracticesolutions.com and see what we can do for you. All right, till the next time, be safe, be healthy. I'll talk to you then.